I'm not coming back. I've met someone better. That text hit my phone at 11:42 p.m. on a Thursday night while I was standing alone in my kitchen finishing a lukewarm cup of coffee. My wife Dana was supposed to be in Palm Springs on a girls' trip. Instead, she blindsided me with a breakup and a screenshot, 118 hours gone from our joint account, funneled into hers. 15 years of marriage vanished with 2 sentences and a bank transfer. But here's the part. She didn't know I'd been preparing for this day long before she ever sent that message. And by the end of this story, you'll see how I turned her betrayal into something she never saw coming. Trust me, you'll want to hear how this ends. My name's Leonard Matthews. I'm 54 years old, a forensic accountant, by trade, trained to spot the smallest inconsistencies, the tiniest red flags. Ironically, I saw all the signs in my marriage. The longer girls' trips, the sudden interest in expensive clothes she never wore around me, the phone she'd tilt away when I entered the room. I saw it all. I just didn't want to believe it. Not from the woman I'd built my life around. I told myself I was imagining things. That's the thing about denial. It's comfortable, right up until it isn't. That night, as I set down my phone and stared at our wedding photo, the last one still hanging in our condo, something in me shifted. She thought she had the upper hand. She had no idea what I'd been quietly building behind the scenes. And now, for the first time in years, I was ready to act. What she didn't realize yet was that her girls' trip just triggered the beginning of mine. I should have seen it coming. Honestly, I did. I just chose not to deal with it. For months, Dana had been pulling away, but she did it so gradually that if you weren't paying attention, you'd think nothing had changed. But I was paying attention. I'm a forensic accountant. I've spent the last 20 years studying inconsistencies for a living, following paper trails, spotting fraud, and dissecting lies dressed up in numbers. I saw the way her weekend retreats turned into full weeks. I saw the new clothes with price tags still attached, the high-end wellness products showing up at the door, the photos she posted online that were never meant for me. I noticed every bit of it, but instead of asking questions, I buried myself in my work. I convinced myself that I didn't want to rock the boat. Truth is, I was scared of what I'd find if I started digging. And as much as I wanted to believe we were just going through a rough patch, some part of me deep down already knew we were past the point of saving. Dana had always been bold. That's what first drew me in when we met at an alumni mixer at the University of Iowa. I was 38, newly divorced from a short, uneventful marriage. I'd thrown myself into my career, and I wasn't looking for anything serious. Then she walked in, 34, glowing with energy, charismatic. In that way people in wellness circles tend to be. She didn't care much for what I did. In fact, whenever I tried to explain a case to her, she'd wave me off with a smile and say, "As long as you're doing well, that's all I need to know." I mistook that for trust. Now I understand it was disinterest, maybe even calculation. When we got married a year later, I used most of my savings to help her open a yoga studio. She called it her dream. I called it our future. It didn't matter that I had to put in extra hours at the office to afford the upscale location and custom renovations. She needed the best, and I gave it to her. When she asked for a bigger home, I agreed. When she said she wanted a European SUV instead of her reliable sedan, I didn't blink. I just signed the checks. It never occurred to me that I was being groomed. My father once said something to me while we were fixing the old deck behind his place. He was a quiet man, and he rarely gave advice unless he felt it deeply. "Son," he said, pausing with his hammer mid-swing, "I notice Dana spends a lot of your money. Just make sure she values what you do to earn it." I brushed it off. Now all these years later, his words ring louder than ever. About 6 years into our marriage, something inside me shifted. It was subtle at first, just a lingering doubt. But it was enough to prompt me to act. I didn't confront Dana. I didn't accuse her. Instead, I did what I knew how to do. I protected myself. Quietly, legally, thoroughly. I created 2 LLCs under nondescript names, shifted some long-term investments into crypto wallets, opened offshore accounts for international clients that I could also use for personal storage. I rerouted small percentages of my income to these channels, nothing suspicious, nothing dramatic, just a steady repositioning. By the time Dana left, the bulk of our real wealth was inaccessible to her because she didn't even know it existed. She only ever saw the joint accounts, and I let her. I let her believe the visible pile of money was all we had, and she spent freely. I didn't fight her on it. I played the long game. Meanwhile, she was evolving too, at least publicly. Her social media turned into a curated gallery of fitness tips, motivational quotes, expensive retreat snapshots, and carefully staged selfies with green smoothies and ocean views. Her follower count climbed into the tens of thousands. I wasn't in a single photo. The first time she forgot my birthday, I let it go. We'd just returned from a trip to Sedona, one she insisted on, even though I had deadlines. When I reminded her the next day, she acted horrified, ran out to buy me an expensive watch, and swore it was because of the studio expansion. I accepted the gift, smiled, and thanked her. But that night after she fell asleep, I finalized the legal documents that would form the backbone of my exit plan. It felt like signing a will for a relationship that was still technically alive. The highlight came just last Christmas. I caught her texting someone late at night. When I walked in the room, she turned the screen over like a guilty teenager. That's when it clicked. This wasn't just a woman drifting emotionally. This was a woman laying groundwork. She was building a new life in secret, while using mine to fund it. She was already gone. I was just too polite to admit it. So when I got her text in the kitchen that night, I didn't rage. I didn't scream or sob or throw things. I just felt a strange calm. She thought she'd caught me off guard. She had no idea I'd been 10 steps ahead of her for years. The game she thought she was playing had different rules, ones I had written. That night, as the silence settled in, I opened my laptop and accessed one of the secure accounts Dana didn't know existed. 3 alerts blinked across the screen. Someone had tried changing passwords on a few financial profiles. That someone was thorough. I had to respect the effort. But she was still too late. I picked up the phone and called my brother Jason. He answered on the 3rd ring. "Remember that contingency plan we talked about 5 years ago?" I asked. "Yeah," he said. "It's time I told him." She just made her move. Jason didn't hesitate. "Got it. I'll set things in motion." As I ended the call, I stood up and looked around the condo. Everything in it had been chosen by Donna. Furniture, art, rugs, the overpriced blender she insisted on. Suddenly it all looked like a stage set in someone else's life. But I wasn't walking off stage quietly. Not this time. I was about to turn the lights on, and when I did, she'd see that the real power had never left the room. At 5:32 the next morning, I was up dressed and brewing coffee in the kitchen like I did every other weekday. My body moved through the familiar routine, but everything around me felt like it belonged to someone else. I glanced at the empty chair across from mine and let the silence wrap around me. It wasn't loneliness. It was clarity. After 15 years of excuses, I finally had permission from her own text message to stop pretending we were still building something together. What she didn't realize was that while she had spent the last year setting up her escape, I had spent the last 6 preparing for impact. By 6:00 a.m. I was at my desk. I logged into the custom-built financial system I'd created for my firm, and slowly adapted for personal use over the years. Designed to track anomalies in multi-million-dollar portfolios, it now served one purpose: to protect me. I opened the contingency protocol Jason and I had written over late nights and bourbon 5 years ago. It was just a hypothetical then insurance against worst-case scenarios. Today, it became real. One keystroke at a time, I activated every layer of the plan. First, I froze all joint accounts, checking savings and credit cards. With my credentials and long-standing relationships at the banks, the process took under 20 minutes. Donna would find out the hard way. Next, I contacted my banker directly. I flagged the $118,000 transfer as unauthorized. Since it had happened only hours ago, I had a shot at stopping it. I submitted the necessary documents, screenshots, timestamps, and the final nail, her own text message, admitting she'd moved out and met someone better. Legally, she'd just framed herself for financial misconduct. I didn't smile. This wasn't a game. This was war, and I didn't feel like a winner. I felt prepared. That was all. My attorney, Lessa Sheridan, picked up on the first ring. I'd worked with her before on corporate matters. Sharp, strategic, not easily rattled. Dana's gone, I told her. She took $118,000 and moved my things into storage. I need to file for divorce today. There was a beat of silence. Then she responded in her usual calm tone. We'll make it happen. Email me every document, every communication, and I'll handle the rest. I sent her the full package within the hour: financial history asset, lists copies of trust agreements, screenshots of Dana's Instagram, showing her girl's trip with someone who looked suspiciously like Trey Harmon. Before noon, my mother called. I hadn't told her yet. Maybe I didn't want to say it out loud, but she had that intuition moms always seem to have. Leonard, is everything okay? I paused. Dana's left. She took the money and made it clear she's not coming back. Her breath caught. Oh, sweetheart, she said gently. What are you going to do now? I looked around the living room, hers, really not mine, and answered without hesitation. What I've been preparing to do for years. I'm going to protect what's mine. That's when my phone lit up. Dana. I let it ring. Then another call, and another. 10 missed calls in 20 minutes. Finally, a text came through. What the hell did you do? The money's gone, and my cards aren't working. I stared at the message for a long moment before I closed the screen. The high point wasn't watching her panic. It was knowing I didn't owe her a single word. Want to hear something satisfying? If you've ever been betrayed and stayed quiet because you weren't ready to fight back, hit like. Share this with someone who needs to hear it, because when you finally move in silence, they never see it coming. By 2:30 p.m., I drove to the storage facility Dana mentioned in her message. I had no idea what would be waiting for me. She gave me a code. No words, no address, just the information I needed to collect the few things she considered worth sparing. 2 cardboard boxes sat in a 5x10 unit, neatly stacked, labeled Leonard. I opened the top one. Close a pair of sneakers, my laptop. No books, no photos. None of the mementos from my father, his old watch, the deck-building plans we'd drawn together by hand, even the vintage fly rod we restored before he passed. She took all of it, or threw it away. That's when something shifted inside me. A deeper level of betrayal surfaced, not about the money, or even the affair, but about what she chose to discard. Dana hadn't just ended a marriage. She'd tried to erase me from it entirely. I closed the box, slowly, and carried both out to the truck. At a nearby coffee shop, I opened my laptop and got to work. I still hadn't said his name out loud, but I knew exactly who he was. Trey Harmon, the man Dana had been tagging for months. While she posted yoga poses and inspirational quotes, Trey was always nearby in the background, smiling shirtless, dripping charisma. I pulled up the professional investigation database I use for clients and entered his name. Then I searched for Harmon Fitness, LLC. What I found confirmed everything I suspected. 3 maxed-out business credit cards, a ballooning equipment lease, commercial space he couldn't afford. His gym wasn't booming, it was bleeding, and Dana had already co-signed on a car loan for him 2 months ago. $80,000 in joint assets had been funneled into a man who was drowning in debt. She wasn't just starting a new chapter. She was bailing water out of someone else's sinking ship with my bucket. If you've ever uncovered a truth that crushed you, but also set you free, leave a comment below. This moment, right here. It hurt like hell. But it woke me up. I closed the laptop and sat for a moment, staring out the window. My hands weren't shaking. I wasn't angry. I wasn't broken. I was clear, focused, and ready. Tomorrow morning I'd walk into my office like nothing happened, because for now the less noise I made, the more damage I could prevent. Or deliver if it came to that. And Dana. She was about to realize she hadn't left me behind. She'd walked right into the one thing she never expected, a man who knew exactly how to respond without ever raising his voice. Monday morning arrived like any other. The sun poured through the blinds of my hotel room, as if the world hadn't changed, as if Dana hadn't gutted our marriage and bank account just days before. I'd slept better than I expected. There's something strangely liberating about facing the truth head-on. I showered, dressed in my usual work clothes, navy blazer, pressed shirt, leather shoes polished out of habit, and headed into my office like it was any ordinary start to the week. But nothing was ordinary anymore. Not for me. Not for her. Valerie, my assistant of 7 years, looked up in surprise the moment I stepped through the door. "Leonard, I thought you'd be taking some time off. Dana called here 3 times already." I paused, set my briefcase on my desk, and looked her square in the eyes. "Did she?" I said, not really asking. Valerie nodded. "She said there was a misunderstanding with your bank accounts, and she needed to reach you urgently. I kept my voice even. If she calls again, direct her to my attorney. No exceptions." Valerie blinked, but said nothing. She was sharp enough to sense the undertone. By noon I was reviewing client audits when the receptionist buzzed in. "Your wife is here. She's very insistent." I didn't sigh. I didn't flinch. I simply straightened my jacket and walked to the front lobby. Dana stood there in a matching yoga set that probably cost more than my entire outfit. Her designer sunglasses were pushed up on her head, and her smile was rehearsed, warm, approachable, disarming. She used to flash that same smile at dinner parties when she wanted me to stop talking about work. "Leonard," she said, her voice overly bright. "There's been a huge misunderstanding with the bank. All our accounts are frozen." She spoke loud enough for everyone in the lobby to hear, but I kept my tone low and steady. "Not a misunderstanding. You transferred money without authorization. The bank flagged it as fraud." Her smile wavered. "It was our joint account. I'm your wife." I stared at her, then replied softly but firmly, "You're my soon-to-be ex-wife who emptied our savings and texted me from a beach that you'd found someone new. That's textbook financial misconduct." Her expression cracked. Her voice dropped. "You can't do this to me. I've already put deposits down on a new place. I've made commitments to Trey." I nodded. Yes, I know all about Trey Harmon. And right there in front of the receptionist and 3 clients, pretending not to eavesdrop, her face went pale. "What do you mean?" she whispered. I met her eyes. "You'll find out during discovery." I turned and walked back to my office without another word. What would you do if someone stood in front of you trying to smile their way past a betrayal that wrecked your life? Would you call them out or walk away in silence? Let me know your take on that moment in the comments. That afternoon, an email came in from Donna's newly hired attorney. The subject line, "Immediate action required." The body of the email accused me of withholding access to marital assets and threatened to expose alleged irregularities in my financial practice unless I responded within 24 hours. I read it twice, then forwarded it to Lisa, my lawyer, with one line, "Proceed as planned." It was an amateur move. The threat had no substance. Anyone who knew me or my work would know I was too meticulous to leave loose threads behind. But what rattled me most wasn't the empty threat. It was the realization that Dana believed she still had leverage, that she still thought she was playing a game she could win. By evening, my phone was flooded with messages not from Dana, but from mutual friends. People I hadn't heard from in months suddenly wanted to know why I was freezing accounts, why I wasn't letting Dana access her money, and what really happened between us. It was obvious she'd rallied sympathy behind the scenes. No one asked where she'd been the past week. No one asked about the $118,000, just assumptions and accusations. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Instead, I drove to the gym. Not the one Dana opened, not the flash and mirror kind Trey owned. No, I went to the old community center gym I'd been going to for years. No influencers, no smoothie bars, just sweat and silence. I lifted weights until my arms shook, then sat in the locker room, staring at the tiled floor, letting the ache in my muscles quiet the ache in my chest. You ever been in that place where it's not the betrayal that hurts the most? It's the part where people believe the liar over you. It's a special kind of pain. If you've felt it, hit share. Someone out there might need to know they're not alone. 3 days later, I got a call from Lisa. "We found something," she said. "Dana's been siphoning money from your joint account for over a year. Small transfers at first, then larger ones, around $80,000 total. Most of it went to an LLC registered under Trey Harmon's name." I didn't say anything for a few seconds. I wasn't surprised. I had expected something like this. But hearing it confirmed, hearing that she'd not only left me, but funded her new life with my money, hit deeper than I thought it would. "That qualifies as financial infidelity," Lisa added. "We'll include it in the filing." I thanked her and hung up. Then I stared out the window of my office, watching the traffic pass by in the street below. It wasn't rage, I felt. It was a strange, focused detachment, like every emotion had compressed itself into a single thought. You tried to bury me with my own shovel. Later that night, I received a text from an unfamiliar number. It read, "You need to back off. Dana deserves better than you. Don't make this uglier than it needs to be." Trey Harmon had finally decided to get involved. I sat there in the glow of my laptop, rereading his message. No punctuation, no tact, just bold arrogance dressed up as a threat. And that was the moment I knew exactly what my next move would be. Because this wasn't just about heartbreak anymore. It was about someone using me to build a house of cards, and I'd just found the wind. The next morning, I drove across town to my brother Jason's house. He lived in a modest 2-story brick place in a quiet neighborhood, exactly the kind of low-profile life Dana used to sneer at when she wanted to remind me of everything we could afford if I just worked a little harder. Jason was in digital security, and we'd collaborated plenty over the years on complex fraud cases for clients who'd trusted the wrong people. But this wasn't business. This was personal. He greeted me with a nod and a mug of coffee. No questions, no small talk. Just a man who knew the look on his brother's face meant it was time to dig. "I need everything you can get on Harmon Fitness, LLC, I told him. Bank records, business loans, credit apps, all public sources, of course. Jason smirked. Legal channels only right. Of course, I replied. We're just connecting the dots faster than most people can. He cracked his knuckles and went to work. Within 3 hours, we had a complete picture, and it wasn't pretty. Trey Harmon's entire fitness empire was built on sand. His gym had taken out 3 commercial loans over the last 18 months, all tied to inflated equipment values and projected memberships that never materialized. Credit card debt sat at nearly $74,000. His business was underwater, held together by image branding and borrowed time. The most disturbing part wasn't the failing business, it was Dana's involvement. She'd co-signed on a $175,000 equipment loan 4 months ago. Her signature was right there, on the digital form, filed with the bank, while we were still legally married. The loan used our marital status as a basis for approval, which meant whether I knew it or not, my assets had been leveraged to secure a deal I never agreed to. Jason leaned back in his chair. She did this before she even left you, he said. That makes it worse. She knew what she was doing. I stared at the screen. She didn't just leave. She put me on the hook for his collapse. Take a second and really think about that. Would you stay quiet if your spouse used your financial identity to back someone else's dream? Share this story with someone who needs to hear how dangerous silence can be. There was more. Dana had also co-signed a car lease, for Trey opened 3 joint business credit cards tied to Harmon Fitness, and secured a new commercial rental space for a second studio location, again all based on shared income figures that included mine. She'd built their fantasy on the back of my stability. I stood up and walked to the window. Outside, a group of neighborhood kids were kicking a soccer ball across a wide lawn, laughter echoing through the street. That simple joy, that innocence felt like a world away from where I stood, shoulders tight, blood cold, realizing my life had been used as collateral for someone else's mess. She has no idea what she's done, I said finally, and neither does he. Jason nodded. That's the danger with people like them. They think leverage means power until the banks come knocking. The next morning I met with Lassa in her downtown office. Her desk was already stacked with everything we'd found. This isn't just a messy divorce anymore, she said, flipping through the documents. We're looking at potential fraud, loan misrepresentation, even financial abuse. I'll file for emergency asset protection today. That should stop any further damage before they figure out what's happening. That afternoon I drove to Harmon Fitness. I wanted to see it for myself. The gym was sleek, all glass walls, black floors, neon motivational quotes painted across steel beams. Half the people there were posing for selfies more than lifting weights. I scanned the room until I spotted him, Trey Harmon, in all his filtered glory. He looked just like his social media tall, tan-capped teeth muscle tank, clinging to a chiseled frame. He caught my eye and smiled like a man used to winning people over. You must be Leonard, he said, reaching out a hand. I didn't take it. We need to talk, I said, and motioned toward the office behind him. His smile faded, but he led the way. Inside his glass-walled office, I placed a folder on his desk. This is every document connecting you and Dana to my financial identity loans, credit cards, leases, all co-signed using marital assets. He blinked, picked up the folder, slowly flipping through pages that listed dollar amounts, approval dates, and legal ties. I don't understand, he mumbled. It's simple, I said. Dana used our marriage to get those loans approved. We're divorcing now, which invalidates those guarantees. He looked pale. These are legitimate business agreements. Maybe. But they were built on my name. And now the banks are going to ask some very hard questions. "What do you want?" he asked. "Nothing," I replied. "This isn't about you. I just thought you should know what's coming. Would you have walked out of that office quietly, or taken everything down with you? Drop a comment below. I'm curious, how far would you go to protect your name?" I left him there, still holding the folder, jaw tight, eyes wide. On the way back to the hotel, I felt something strange. Not anger, not victory. Just an overwhelming sense of stillness, like the tide had finally pulled back, revealing everything hidden beneath the surface. That same evening, a courier dropped off a box at my door. No note, no message. Just a cardboard container with my father's old watch, a stack of family photos, and a few personal items Dana had taken when she left. I stared at it for a long time before opening it. Maybe Trey made her send it. Or maybe she realized she crossed a line too far, even for herself. Either way, the damage was done. The emotional cost had already been paid. I put the watch on my wrist, held the photo of my father for a minute, and then slid everything back inside. I wasn't done yet, not by a long shot, and tomorrow the courts would start seeing the side of Dana she'd kept carefully hidden for years. The following morning, I sat across from Lisa in her conference room, sunlight cutting sharp lines across the table, stacked with legal documents and case files. She had just finished reviewing the latest records. Jason uncovered loan terms, co-signed agreements, and forged income declarations. Without lifting her eyes from the page, she said, "We file for emergency asset protection today. The financial fraud alone is enough to get everything frozen until the divorce is finalized." I nodded. "Let's move quickly." Before they even realized the floors falling out beneath them, within hours, court documents were filed. A judge approved our petition by mid-afternoon. Every account, every investment, every piece of real property shared under our marriage license was now locked down. Dana couldn't touch a thing. Trey couldn't access a single account she tied him into. Not the gym's expansion loan, not the vehicle lease, not even the business credit cards. The financial web she spun was unraveling thread by thread, and I didn't need to lift a finger. The banks would handle the rest. That afternoon, I logged into my secure financial dashboard. A string of alerts lit up the screen, 17 separate attempts to access our frozen account within the last 24 hours. Dana was scrambling. She'd also tried to open a new credit line, using our marital home as collateral. Denied. The message was clear: she was desperate, and she was alone in it now. That's when my phone lit up again. This time, I answered. "What the hell have you done?" she said, her voice shaking with a mix of rage and panic. "The bank called in Trey's loans. They're seizing the equipment tomorrow." I stayed silent for a beat, then calmly replied, "That's unfortunate. This is vindictive, Leonard. You're destroying him just to get back at me." "I'm not doing anything to him," I said. "I'm protecting myself. You used our marriage to back his loans without my knowledge or consent. That's fraud." She went quiet. Then her voice softened into the tone she used to use when she wanted something. "We can work this out. Come home. Let's talk." 15 years, and she still thought manipulation could work on me. "There's nothing to work out," I told her. "The divorce will proceed. The fraud investigation will continue. Trey will learn what due diligence means. What would you have said in that moment? Would you have taken the bait and gone back, or stood your ground? Drop a comment below. I want to hear how you would have handled that call." I ended the call and blocked her number. That night I slept deeply, the kind of sleep that only comes after truth has fully replaced illusion. I didn't feel victorious, but I felt clean. 3 weeks later, we were ordered to appear for mediation. Court rules required one attempt to resolve the division of assets outside a full trial. Dana walked in, wearing an expensive suit, makeup flawless, every hair in place. But the strain showed in her posture. The shine was gone. Her attorney, a man whose name I barely registered, opened with the usual performance. My client is willing to be reasonable, despite the tactics employed thus far. Lisa gave a polite smile and slid a folder across the table. That's good to hear, because there's been a development. Dana's attorney opened the document. His expression shifted fast, brows furrowed, lips pressed tight. Lisa continued. The bank completed its fraud investigation. They've determined Dana forged Leonard's signature on multiple financial documents, using marital assets as collateral without his knowledge. They've referred the matter to the district attorney. Donna's face drained of color. Criminal charges, she said, her voice brittle. Leonard, you can't be serious. I met her eyes steady. I didn't press charges. The bank did. That's what happens when you commit loan fraud. Her attorney leaned in, whispering something frantic into her ear. She shook her head slightly, lips trembling. Lisa spoke again. However, if Ms. Bowman agrees to sign the proposed settlement today, Leonard is prepared to provide a mitigating statement to the bank. He also won't pursue charges for the theft of personal property or the unauthorized transfer from the joint account. This was the moment she realized the illusion of control was over. Her world, built on charm and shortcuts, had crashed into something immovable, and for once there was no one left to blame. If you've ever watched someone finally face the consequences, they tried so hard to outrun hit that like button. Because justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it just waits patiently with receipts. Dana signed the papers without protest. As we stood, she touched my arm. I never thought you'd fight back like this, she said. You always went along with everything. I looked at her. No bitterness left in me, only clarity. That was my choice, I said, just like this was yours. Then I walked out. No need to look back. Outside, the sky was overcast, but the air felt clean. I didn't feel lighter. Not yet. But the weight I carried wasn't mine anymore. As I stepped into my truck, Lisa called. It's done, she said. The house is legally yours. The studio is hers. No alimony. She assumes all debts attached to Trey's business. I thanked her and ended the call. I didn't go back to the hotel. I went straight to a small house near downtown that I'd quietly purchased weeks earlier. A simple craftsman with weathered siding and a porch that needed sanding. It wasn't much, but it was mine. The next chapter wouldn't be built on illusion or performance. It would be something real, even if it started with nothing but sawdust and silence. A month passed. I moved into the craftsman near downtown Des Moines. It wasn't anything special, at least not on paper. Built in the 1940s, faded green paint, a sagging porch railing floors that creaked like an old man's knees. But every part of it felt like mine. No design choices made to impress guests. No furniture hand-picked by someone trying to stage a lifestyle. Just 4 walls, a roof that needed patching, and a space that let me breathe. Most nights, I worked on the house after the sun went down. Installed shelves in the kitchen, refinished the cabinets by hand, fixed the water pressure in the upstairs bathroom. It was the kind of work Dana used to scoff at. Why bother, she'd say. We can just hire someone. But she never understood the value of doing things with your own hands, of standing in a room and knowing it looks the way it does because you made it that way. Word about what happened spread fast, though I didn't speak to many people. A few of our mutual friends stopped calling. Some sent awkward messages. Most stayed silent, unsure which version of the story to believe. Dana's social media had gone quiet. Her wellness posts and perfectly lit yoga shots disappeared almost overnight. Then about 2 weeks after the settlement, someone forwarded me a screenshot from her new Instagram account, mountain views, cryptic quotes about healing, a caption that read, "Sometimes you have to lose everything to find yourself." No mention of Trey, no explanation, just a carefully curated version of the aftermath. Like always, she only shared what kept her in control of the narrative. Trey's gym, on the other hand, wasn't quite so quiet. Word came through industry forums that Harmon Fitness had been sold off to a national chain quickly and quietly. Equipment repossessed. Lease terminated. Trey had relocated to Miami, where he was trying to rebrand himself as a digital fitness coach. His website was still live, but the coaching packages were steep, the testimonials vague, and the contact page led nowhere. The empire they tried to build off my back had crumbled in silence, and neither of them said a word about it. You ever notice how people love to post their wins but never their losses? We live in a world built on highlight reels, but what matters, what really matters, happens in the silence, in the work no one sees. One Saturday morning, Jason stopped by to help me hang a new door in the back. He walked in carrying a tool belt and a six-pack of local beer, same as he did when we were kids, helping Dad with weekend projects. "Place looks good," he said, setting the beer on the counter. "Looks like it belongs to someone again." I shrugged. "Still a lot of work to do." "Yeah," he said, "but now you get to do it your way." We spent most of the day measuring, cutting, leveling. At one point, while drilling into the frame, Jason glanced at me. "You know, he said, you could have gone after her harder. The fraud charges alone would have buried her. You didn't even touch the offshore accounts." I leaned back against the wall, wiping sweat from my brow. And what would that prove? That I can win, I already did. She's not my problem anymore. That quiet truth hung between us heavier than any tool in the box. I hadn't chosen mercy. I'd chosen peace. That night after Jason left, I sat on the back porch with a glass of bourbon. The street was quiet. A few kids rode bikes down the block laughing as their wheels kicked gravel. A dog barked somewhere down the street. In that moment I felt something I hadn't in years, contentment. Not happiness. That comes and goes. But peace, real peace. That's rare. The house creaked behind me like it was settling into its own new chapter, and I let my thoughts drift, not to Dana, not even to Trey, but to my dad. I remembered us standing on his deck hammering in boards one summer afternoon. He wasn't a man of many words, but when he did speak, it stuck. "Don't just build something that looks good," he'd said. "Build something that lasts." At the time I thought he was talking about the deck. Now I know he was talking about life. If you've ever rebuilt your life from the ground up, not for applause, but for yourself, hit that like button and leave a comment. Some people need to know it's okay to start over, even if no one's watching. As the sun dipped below the rooftops and the streetlights flickered on, I stood up, stretched my back, and headed inside. Tomorrow I'd be returning to work full-time. Same job, same desk, but a different man walking through the door, and little did I know the most unexpected twist hadn't arrived yet. Monday morning came quietly. I shaved, buttoned my shirt, knotted my tie, and drove to the office like I'd done for years. Same parking spot, same elevator ride, same creaky floorboard, 2 steps from my door. But this time it wasn't muscle memory carrying me through the day. It was purpose. I wasn't returning to who I was before. That version of me was gone. This version, he walked lighter, spoke less, listened more, and had zero tolerance for anything that drained peace. Valerie greeted me with her usual smile, though her eyes searched mine for something. "You look different," she said. "Better." I gave a slight nod. "I am. I stepped into my office, turned on the desk lamp, and started catching up on a backlog of client audits. Numbers don't lie, and for a man coming off months of emotional chaos, the clarity of a clean spreadsheet felt like a balm. By late afternoon, I was deep into a financial dispute between two construction partners when Valerie knocked. "There's someone here asking for you," she said. Didn't give a name. Said she'd wait. I stood up slowly. Valerie nodded. Tall brunette, early 40s, wearing yoga gear. I closed the file, my heart dropping without a sound. "Tell her I'm unavailable." Valerie hesitated. I already did. She's still in the lobby. I walked out not because I wanted to see her, but because I needed to make sure there wasn't anything left in me to give. Dana stood near the window, hands clasped, eyes, scanning the street, as if the view would explain everything. She turned when I approached. "Leonard," she said quietly. "You look good." I didn't answer. She stepped closer. "I'm not here to fight. I wanted to talk. No lawyers, no blame." Her voice was softer, her expression less polished. There were signs of wear now, fine lines, the makeup couldn't hide tension sitting behind the smile. I crossed my arms. "You're 3 months late for that." She took a breath. "I know, I didn't expect it to end this way." "Did you expect to walk out with the money, start over with someone else, and face no consequences?" "No," she said quickly. "I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought Trey was." She stopped herself. I tilted my head. "You thought he was your way out." She didn't deny it. Instead, her eyes dropped. "He's gone. Miami didn't work out. The gym deal fell through. He changed his number. I haven't heard from him in weeks." I didn't flinch. "That's not my concern anymore." She nodded slowly. "I'm not asking for anything. I just needed to see you once without a courtroom between us." I stared at her for a long moment. The woman who once shared my name, my home, my life, now standing like a guest in a space she used to own. I didn't hate her. I didn't pity her. I just didn't feel anything at all. "Are you happy?" she asked, finally. I let the silence stretch. Then I said, "I'm free." Her eyes welled up, but she blinked it away. "I'm sorry, Leonard, for everything." I didn't respond. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small envelope. "Photos," she said. "From the house. Ones I know meant something to you." I took it without looking inside. She stepped back. "I'll go now." She turned and walked toward the door, then paused. If I had done things differently, would we still be? I cut her off. "You didn't. That's all that matters." She nodded and left. If you've ever faced the person who hurt you and felt nothing where everything used to be, leave a comment. That's not bitterness. That's healing. I returned to my desk, sat in silence, and finally opened the envelope. Inside were a few photos of my dad and me, one of our dog, and an old birthday card she must have found during the move. Nothing valuable, just pieces of a life that had once felt whole. I tucked them into the bottom drawer of my desk. That night I went home and stood in the driveway for a while, looking at the house I was slowly making my own. Porch lights, glowing wind brushing through the trees. No performance, no pretending, just real life, quiet and unspectacular in the best possible way. I stepped inside, set my keys down, and started flipping through some of the home improvement books Jason had given me. I wasn't rushing the work. Each project, each repair was an act of reclaiming. I wasn't just fixing a house, I was rebuilding the rhythm of a life that answered to no one but me. And the next morning I'd wake up to an email that would change everything again, though this time not from Dana, not from Trey, and not from a lawyer. This time, it would come from someone I hadn't heard from in almost 20 years. The email came just before sunrise. Subject line, catching up after all these years. No attachments, no long threads, just one message from someone I hadn't heard from since the early 2000s, Emily Rhodes. We'd dated in our early 30s back when my first marriage had just ended, and I was trying to figure out who I was without someone next to me. Emily had been different, sharp, funny, stubborn in the way that makes you want to argue just to hear her push back. We were never reckless, but the timing was never quite right. I had a growing accounting firm to run, and she had just started teaching at the university. After a year, we drifted apart. No bad blood, just real life, pulling in different directions. She moved out to Colorado. I buried myself in work and eventually met Dana. Her message was simple. "Hi, Leonard. I heard about what happened. I was in Des Moines last month visiting a friend and thought of you. If you ever want to catch up, I'd love to grab a coffee." I stared at the screen for a while, unsure how to respond. The email wasn't romantic, not even nostalgic, just open-ended, respectful. Still, it hit something I hadn't felt in a long time, the curiosity of what might have been. Later that day, after finishing up a meeting with a logistics firm I'd consulted for over a decade, I replied, "Hi, Emily, I'd like that. How about Friday at 10? There's a cafe on 5th and Linden, quiet good coffee, and no Wi-Fi on purpose." She responded within 10 minutes. "Perfect. See you there." Friday came fast. I arrived early like always and grabbed a seat near the window. When she walked in, it took me a second to recognize her, not because she looked so different, but because she looked exactly the same in all the ways that mattered. Same confident stride, same calm in her expression. No rush, no performance. She smiled. Leonard Matthews, still early to everything. I grinned. "And you still lead with sarcasm." We talked for over 2 hours, about where she'd been, what she'd built. Turns out she'd never remarried. Taught at CU Boulder for a while, then moved into nonprofit work, running financial literacy programs for underfunded schools. She'd read about Dana's fraud case in a legal newsletter she still subscribed to. When I saw your name, I had to check the photo. Then I sat there for an hour, wondering if I should even reach out, she said. "I'm glad you did," I replied, and meant it. There was no awkwardness, no hidden agenda, just two people who used to know each other well catching up, like time had hit pause instead of skip. For the first time in a long while, I felt seen, not for what I'd lost, not for what I'd rebuilt, but for who I was in that exact moment. As we stepped outside, she glanced up at the sky. "You still into fishing?" I blinked. "You remember that?" "Of course I do," she said. "You had that old cabin up near Ely. You said it was the only place where you could breathe without thinking." I chuckled. Still true. "Well," she said, "if you ever want company on a quiet lake, I've gotten pretty good at casting. That moment right there, that was the highlight. Not because it promised anything, but because it didn't. It just offered a possibility, a rare, gentle kind. Have you ever reconnected with someone from your past and realized time didn't erase the bond, it just let it mature? Drop a comment. I'd love to hear your story. The days after our coffee were simple. We didn't text constantly, no daily updates, just a quiet understanding that the door was open. I kept working on the house, taking time off here and there. The silence in my life was no longer heavy. It was restorative. Then one morning, while going through some documents for a client in real estate development, I noticed something strange in the data. A small pattern, a familiar name buried in an LLC tied to a shell company operating out of Nevada. I pulled the thread, and with every layer I unraveled my gut, twisted tighter. The numbers didn't lie. And the name behind the company, Trey Harmon. Turns out Trey hadn't disappeared. He'd changed tactics, moved the operation from gyms to real estate, using borrowed identities and shady investors to fund quick property flips in distressed neighborhoods. His Instagram might have gone quiet, But he was still hustling just in the shadows now. And the worst part, a portion of the seed money came from the very accounts Dana had tapped into. She hadn't just been naive. She'd been the front door. I sat there staring at the screen pulse, steady but cold. It wasn't over. Not even close. And if this operation collapsed, the legal fallout might reach deeper than any of them realized. What would you do if the man who tried to use your life as a ladder popped back up in someone else's backyard? Would you go after him again or walk away for good? Let me know how you'd handle it. I shut the laptop, gently walked to the window, and watched a couple walking their dog under the fading afternoon sun. Maybe Trey thought he'd slipped away unnoticed. But the thing about running from consequences is eventually you circle back to them. And when he did, I'd be there. Not for revenge, not even for justice, just to make sure the damage stopped with me. Emptied Janoi. By the following week, I had everything I needed. The LLC Trey was funneling money through Blue Hollow Ventures, had a paper trail sloppier than his old gym contracts. Public records showed it was incorporated in Nevada, with a registered agent who'd filed paperwork for over a dozen other shell companies, all within the same 3-month window. Most were linked to short-term real estate flips. The same strategy every time: buy low, renovate cheap, sell fast, disappear, before anyone could ask questions. Except now he was using investor funds pooled through fake partnerships and inflated property appraisals. And some of that capital, confirmed through 2 bank transfers I traced, had originally come from Dana's name, while she was still legally tied to mine. This wasn't just shady. It was criminal. I compiled every document, every financial ledger, cross-referenced entity names, scanned for EIN mismatches, even found a fake invoice Trey used to shift $22,000 from a dummy consulting fee into a separate personal checking account. All traceable, all time-stamped. My hands didn't shake once as I built the report. I wasn't angry. I was focused. This wasn't about revenge. It was about closing the door for good. I called Lisa. I found something you'll want to see. She met me at my office that same evening. I handed her a file thick enough to stop a bullet. She flipped through the first few pages, scanning quickly, then slowing down. "He's in deeper than I thought," she said. "Much deeper. And Dana's name is still attached to at least 2 of the accounts I added. If this goes sideways, it's going to catch her too." We sat in silence for a moment. Then Lisa looked up. "Are you sure you want to pursue this?" "Yes," I said, "but not through the court. Not yet. Then what's your move? We let Trey know we know. That's step 1. Have you ever caught someone red-handed and still given them the chance to walk away clean, just to see who they really are? Tell me what you would have done in my place. Would you strike or give them a warning?" 2 days later, I walked into a quiet co-working space in Omaha, where Trey had started registering mail under a new business alias. The building was modern, full of glass and recycled wood, buzzing with early-stage startups and coffee-charged freelancers. Trey was there, clean-cut pressed polo, acting like the past 6 months never happened. He looked up as I entered, smiled like we were old colleagues. "Leonard. Wow. You're a long way from Des Moines." I placed the manila envelope on the table. "You should read that before you say anything else." He opened it, eyes scanning line after line. His face didn't crack at first, but by the 3rd page, I saw the tension hit jaw, clenching nostrils flaring. He tried to speak. I raised a hand. "Don't. Just listen. You've used false documents to secure funds from at least 3 different investor pools. You've transferred money through entities that don't provide services. You used Dana's name and financial identity on accounts still linked to my estate. This isn't just fraud, Trey. It's traceable federal crime." He looked up, throat dry. "What do you want?" "Nothing," I said. "I'm not here to negotiate. I'm here to warn you. Shut it down, clean your books, pay back what you can, because the minute this blows up, and it will, I won't be the one calling the feds. I've already filed a preliminary notice through my professional licensing board. They're watching now." He leaned back, sweat forming at his temples. "You'd ruin me. You already did that to yourself. If you've ever stared someone in the face and told them the truth, they spent months trying to outrun, leave a comment. It's not always about yelling. Sometimes the quietest words carry the most weight." I left Trey sitting there, no goodbyes. Exchanged. Outside, the wind was sharp, slicing across the parking lot like a truth too long buried finally cutting through. I felt nothing. No triumph, no vindication. Just the cold, clear sense that a storm was finally closing in on the right man. That night, I emailed Lessa to confirm everything had been recorded, time-stamped, and documented. We wouldn't act unless needed, but the file was ready, locked secure, and backed up in 3 locations. As I sat back in my chair, bourbon in hand, I looked around the house. The shelves were finished. The baseboards had been painted. A new lamp I picked up at an estate sale cast warm light across the living room. It didn't look like the life I used to have. It looked better because it was mine. I hadn't heard from Dana since our last meeting. Emily and I exchanged a few quiet emails, nothing intense, just steady, calm human. That was enough. Then one morning a certified letter arrived, no return address, no note inside, just one document, folded twice. It was a cease and desist order, not from Trey, but from a private investment firm in Nevada I hadn't yet identified. The letter was a warning, but I had a feeling it wasn't meant to scare me. It was meant to buy time, and I knew exactly what that meant. Somewhere behind the curtain, someone bigger than Trey was watching. ChatGPT Jin Noi. The cease and desist letter was printed on thick ivory stock, with a gold-embossed letterhead Creswell and Ford, LLP, Las Vegas, Nevada. No explanation, no cover letter, just a sharp warning to discontinue further inquiry or communication regarding the business operations of Blue Hollow Ventures and its affiliated entities. That was it. No mention of Trey. No dispute of facts. Just legal muscle flexing across state lines hoping I'd blink. But I wasn't new to intimidation. I'd spent 2 decades auditing corporate malfeasance oil companies, hiding funds offshore nonprofits, misreporting grants execs, skimming bonuses off books. I knew the game. I also knew this letter wasn't from Trey. This came from someone higher up, someone with the resources and interest to make his mess disappear before it caught fire. I called Lisa that same day. Looks like Trey has investors, or puppeteers. She reviewed the letter and confirmed my instinct. They're trying to freeze your momentum. They want to buy time, maybe even provoke a legal misstep on your part. Then I won't give them one, I said. We won't move recklessly. We'll move precisely. For the next 2 weeks, I tightened everything. I contacted colleagues in real estate law, ran background checks on Creswell and Ford, and pulled property ownership records on every LLC Trey's name had been associated with in the last 18 months. A name kept popping up: Elias Marin, former hedge fund manager known for laundering capital through distressed commercial real estate. Never convicted, frequently sued, always settled, and he was now listed as advisory partner on 3 properties linked to Blue Hollow. The picture sharpened. Trey was never the mastermind. He was a pawn, a good-looking, smooth-talking figurehead propped up to draw in naive investors and keep attention off the real money. Maron funded the deals. Trey sold the dream. Dana was the bridge, unknowingly or not. She connected Trey to legitimate assets through me. It wasn't about a gym anymore. This was organized white-collar crime, and my name had been tangled into its foundation. I didn't want to blow it wide open. I wanted it gone. Have you ever been so close to exposing something bigger than yourself? something that could wreck careers, headlines, reputations, but still chose to be smart. Instead of loud, would you go public or play the long game? Let me know in the comments. I want to hear your take. I met Lisa again in person. We sat in her office for 2 hours going over strategy. We can report this directly to FinCEN, she said, or even the SEC. You have the credentials, the documentation. If you submit the SAR anonymously, you're protected under whistleblower laws. And if I don't, I asked, they'll think they succeeded, that you were scared off. It's your call. I looked out the window. The city skyline didn't feel imposing anymore. It felt manageable. Just another system, another balance sheet to correct. We submit, I said. But we don't go loud. Not yet. I want to see what they do when they realize someone's watching from inside the system. Within 72 hours, we submitted the report, over 200 pages of financial discrepancies, forged appraisals, wire transfer inconsistencies, and shell company overlays. Every step documented, verified, and sealed. Not sent to the police. Not leaked to the press. Just placed where it would be seen by professionals who knew what to do with it. 2 days later, I received an email from an untraceable domain. Just one sentence. You're making a mistake. No signature, no subject, no attachment. I forwarded it to Lisa. She encrypted it and added it to the file. That weekend, I drove up to the lake. No calls, no Wi-Fi. Just the cabin I hadn't visited in nearly 3 years, still carrying the smell of cedar and weathered pine. I cleaned the gutters, fixed a cracked window, and cast a line into water, so still it mirrored the sky. I wasn't escaping. I was preparing. Somewhere downstate, men like Marin were shifting money, moving fast, hoping their house of cards would stay standing just long enough to find another investor, another name, another pawn. But this time, there was a crack in the foundation. One they couldn't patch. As the sun set behind the trees, I sat on the cabin's back steps and thought of my father again. He never said much about justice, but he believed in consequences. You can't fix every wrong, he once told me, but you can stop letting it walk through your door. And that's what I'd done. I hadn't gone to war. I'd locked the door. On my last night at the lake, I opened my laptop to check in with Lisa. She'd received confirmation our report had triggered a formal inquiry. Quiet, confidential, but real. No headlines, no spotlight, just momentum behind the curtain. And the next morning, as I packed up and loaded the truck, I got a message that felt like the final echo from the life I'd left behind. It wasn't from Dana, not from Trey. Not even from a lawyer. It was from Emily. Just 5 words. You free, next weekend, cabin. I spent that weekend at the cabin with Emily. It wasn't a grand reunion or some movie-ending romance. It was 2 people sitting on a weathered porch, drinking coffee in the cold morning air, laughing without trying too hard. We didn't talk much about the past, and that's what made it feel real. There was no need to rewrite anything. We both understood that sometimes life drags you through the fire just to remind you what it means to feel warmth again, and I had finally stepped out of that fire. The man I was a year ago wouldn't recognize the man I am now. I no longer define myself by what was taken from me. I define myself by what I chose to protect and what I chose to let go. The money, the betrayal, the anger, they all became background noise. What matters is the peace I built for myself. Slowly, quietly, honestly. I learned that people will always surprise you, sometimes with their selfishness, and sometimes with their grace. I learned that silence doesn't mean weakness, and that walking away isn't surrender. Sometimes it's the bravest thing you can do. I'm not here to paint myself as a victim or a hero. I'm just a man who noticed the signs, made mistakes, prepared for the worst, and came out the other side, with his name and dignity intact. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever had to start over or protect yourself from someone you trusted, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And if you haven't already, consider subscribing to this channel. These stories aren't just for entertainment. They're reminders that real life is messy, beautiful, painful, and worth sharing. Every like, comment, and subscription helps us tell more stories that feel true and speak to something deeper. Because sometimes hearing someone else's journey gives you the clarity to walk your own. Thanks for sticking with me through this one. I hope it stays with you.